Jesus has had many titles over the centuries: Master, Lord, Son of God, Son of Man, Messiah. But you probably never heard anyone refer to Jesus as a surfer. And in recent years, I've come to think that maybe Jesus was a surfer at heart, even if he never rode a board or the waves. Because a surfer is an individual that learns how to participate in something very powerful, but in a way without control. So even though Jesus has the divine power to be able to change his circumstances, in his human form, he submits to not just the will of the Father, but the will of many things, even the will of his own mother. So here we have a case where we've seen in recent weeks where Jesus was doing what many surfers do, was waiting for the right wave. And sometimes when a surfer is trying to not get tossed around in the waves, they'll even dive into the wave to get out of the way a little bit so that the wave kind of crashes over. The energy of the wave is not transmitted to them. And so in recent weeks, we've seen Jesus confronting crowds and then getting out of the way. They pick up rocks to stone him, and he kind of disappears in their midst. You have an angry wave of men with the woman caught in adultery. Jesus takes the woman, dives into the wave passes over them. Today we're celebrating Palm Sunday, and things change. The waves are set up in a particular way and right time, and now Jesus is surfing this wave. The first wave occurs with the wave of people anticipating that Jesus is the Messiah, the King, and they rush him into Jerusalem on the back of a beast of burden. There's all sorts of expectations and hopes as to what Jesus is going to be. Jesus does not stop and correct them. Their thinking of him as a Messiah is not the same as God's thinking as the Messiah. And yet Jesus simply rides his wave for a bit and then gets off. He gets off in the sense that there's this scene in Jerusalem where the people are making a merchant out of the Father's house. Jesus throws a scene and gets out of the way. The second wave that Jesus catches is the people that are out to kill him. He is arrested, interrogated, goes before Pilate, and again he's riding this wave despite his ability to stop it if he so wishes. His conversation with Pilate to say that you think you're in control, but you'd have no control whatsoever if it wasn't for God the Father. So again, Jesus is riding another wave to another destination. So what does this have to do with us? The reality is we do not have the power to control many of the events of our lives. But we may be like a surfer that knows how to perhaps skirt the wave in some circumstances and ride the waves in other circumstances and learn how to participate in a certain way with a power that's beyond our control. We human beings like to be in control of things. We want a steering wheel, we want a gear shift lever, we want brakes and a gas pedal. We want to be in control of our own destiny, when in reality we are participating in forces much larger than ourselves. As we look at the passion and all that Jesus goes through for our sake, it often begs the question as why did it have to happen this way? Why didn't he stop it? Why does God allow evil to exist in this world? And there's a bunch of questions we simply don't have those answers to. But perhaps if we stop and think about things that occur in our lives, we can start to appreciate how God might have a bigger picture than we're aware of. For instance, supposing there's somebody that is young and in love, and they've been dating somebody for so long, and they have their first fight, their first argument, and they're heartbroken, and they go to their grandparent and lament about how they've had this horrendous first fight. And the grandparent might simply say, "Thank God." Why would you say thank God for a fight? Well, until you have an argument, that relationship's never going to grow. It isn't until you go through some hardship that things start to change. You see things from a different perspective. And that even an argument is part of a bigger picture called a loving relationship. It all depends on how you want to interact with that pain and that suffering and those setbacks and that power. So we're facing a tidal wave, so to speak, a pandemic that is certainly a powerful force that we are kind of powerless to stop. And even our attempts to be not victims, to get out of the way as much as possible, are creating waves of their own. And I'm not going to trivialize the effect of the pandemic, or I'm not going to trivialize the power of the suffering that Jesus went through. But in reality, maybe that's part of a much bigger picture that we can't see from our own perspective, our current perspective. If we learn from Jesus to learn how to be surfers, so to speak, to get out of the way when possible, to participate without manipulation in other ways, then maybe we start to discover that we're part of a much bigger program, a much bigger plan that is part of God, that God sees and knows how to make okay. So as we believe that we are celebrating the passion of the Lord because we know that there's a resurrection, may we also see the light in the end of the tunnel because God's hand is involved.